Chapter 14. The End. The return of Bernard and Nils and Miss Bianca, their mission successfully accomplished, has been so often described in mouse history that only a brief account of it is now required. Their welcome at the Moot House was naturally tumultuous. The ceiling rang to shouts of, "3 cheers for Miss Bianca! 3 cheers for Bernard!" Also, "Up the Norwegians!" led by Nils. Madame Chairwoman was actually observed to kiss the secretary. The secretary kissed Miss Bianca. All Bernard's relations kissed Bernard. Nils was presented with both the Jean Fromage medal and the Tybalt star. He in fact had one of these already, but swapped it for a mouth organ, and also, what he appreciated far more, with a replacement for every single possession lost with his sea boots. Bernard and Miss Bianca made the list together, and they remembered everything. Half a pair of socks, a box of elastoplast, a double six of dominoes, a ball of twine, and a folding corkscrew. When Nils saw them all neatly laid out on a silver tray, he showed emotion for the second time. As to the sea boots themselves, cobblers were working night and day on a new pair to a special measure. It was more difficult to know how to reward the raft people until Miss Bianca recalled how the raft wife had shrieked at the sight of her and had made the poet carry them all in his pockets. Then a solemn declaration was drawn up and signed and witnessed by Madame Chairwoman and the Secretary on behalf of all members, to the effect that no mouse should ever in any circumstances set foot on the raft in question, and Bernard undertook to point it out where it lay alongside the wood yard to parties of not more than 20 at a time. Miss Bianca's famous chart was richly framed and hung up beside the Aesop's fabled picture over the speaker's platform. Below, a glass case enshrined her fan, Bernard's spotted handkerchief, and Nils's autograph for the inspiration of future generations. The Nils and Miss Bianca medal, struck in pure silver, was awarded to Nils, Miss Bianca, and Bernard. Bernard himself quite agreed that, and Bernard would have made it sound awkward. He had the most generous nature possible. On one side was depicted the Black Castle, on the reverse a broken fetter. Particulars of this new award were at once distributed to every regional branch of the Prisoners' Aid Society, also to societies overseas, with the request that it should rank above both the Jean Fromage medal and the Tybalt star. "And we mustn't forget your mother's galoshes," said Miss Bianca to Nils. "You're right there," said Nils. "Ma promised she'd fair-skin me if I didn't bring 'em back." "Or would she prefer a new pair?" suggested Miss Bianca. "Not Ma," said Nils positively. "Ma gets so attached to her old galoshes, you wouldn't believe." So they went together to find them in the speedboat. There it still lay, just as they had left it, gently a rock on the embassy boating water, and there were the galoshes too. Leaving Nils to look round, Miss Bianca took them into the cabin and filled each quite full of coffee sugar, and also wrote a grateful note of thanks on ship's writing paper. When she came out again, Nils was still looking round. He was looking and looking, as though he couldn't bear to tear himself away. "It is nice, isn't it?" said Miss Bianca. Nils sighed. "The neatest craft I ever saw." "So I think, too," said Miss Bianca. A1 at Lloyd's, sighed Nils. "I dare say the owner," he added casually, "would have no use for a Nils and Miss Bianca medal." "Now, really," began Miss Bianca. She was about to scold him quite severely, for she suspected all along that he took the splendid honor far too lightly. The wistfulness in his eyes, however, made her pause. "As a swap," suggested Nils. "In the first place," began Miss Bianca again, "decorations are never to be swapped," and again she broke off. If ever anyone wanted anything badly, Nils wanted that speedboat. His hand, caressing a lever, quite shook with yearning. And why not? Miss Bianca asked herself. I'm sure the boy, if he knew all Nils's care of me on the voyage from Norway, would give it to him gladly. Aloud, she said impulsively, "Would you like the speedboat for your own, Nils?" Nils was speechless with joy. He just pulled every lever in sight, turned on the headlights, rammed the quay, nearly swam Miss Bianca, and reversed. But But how will you get it home? Asked Miss Bianca on second thought. We knew you mean to travel with the poet. Far sooner under my own steam, cried Nils. What, through all those dreadful oceans? Exclaimed Miss Bianca, aghast and almost regretting her offer. Please don't think of it, dear Nils. Why, I can think of nothing else, cried Nils. Just hand me over the ship's papers, send a wire to Lloyd's telling them of a change of owners, and I shall be the happiest mouse alive. So Miss Bianca let him have his way. She felt he deserved it. Also, she felt she would never really understand Norwegians. 2. The farewell between the poet and his 3 rescuers was very touching. As Nils had foretold, the poet made his own arrangements for getting home. He fell in with the Norwegian captain with whom he was going to travel back to the port, and there signed on as supercargo, no questions asked. The night before he left, he met Bernard and Nils and Miss Bianca by appointment outside the mood house door. Little Miss Bianca, said he, stooping tenderly down, as soon as I get back to Norway, I shall write a poem about you. Of course, Nils had to translate. Can I really deserve such honor? Exclaimed Miss Bianca modestly, when all I did was but any mouse's duty, yet I thank you from all my heart, and from all my heart wish you well. With extreme delicacy, the poet but laid a finger caressingly on her head. Miss Bianca allowed her whiskers but to brush it. They still understood one another. As for you, continued the poet to Bernard, no stouter soul e'er breathe. I shall never forget your heroism, which it is quite beyond me to thank. And as for you, he added to Nils, all I can say is, look me up in Oslo, and we'll make a proper night of it. Then he tried to hug them all, which was manifestly impossible, and overcome by emotion, turned hastily away. Farewell, dear poet, called Miss Bianca. Farewell, he called back over his shoulder. Farewell, and God bless you all. Bernard and Miss Bianca then accompanied Nils to the embassy boating water to see him off too. He couldn't take Miss Bianca's famous jar with him because it was already hanging in the mood house, but he assured them he remembered the route backwards. Finest chart I ever set eyes on, declared Nils. Wearing his new sea boots, he stepped joyfully on board the speedboat, shook hands with Miss Bianca, slapped Bernard in the back, and with his usual cry, which we will not here repeat, blazed away, headlights flaring, towards the Mediterranean, the Bay of Biscay, and the North Sea. Afterwards, it all seemed very dark and quiet. There was a long pause. And where shall you go, Miss Bianca? Asked Bernard in a low voice. Miss Bianca hesitated. She was actually staying for the moment with Madame Chairwoman, who brought her breakfast in bed each morning, who couldn't spoil her enough, but she obviously couldn't stay with Madame Chairwoman forever. Really, I don't know, murmured Miss Bianca. For the last 6 months, everything has been so extraordinary. If the most devoted affection, began Bernard, even though limited within a pantry, at which moment he was interrupted by a loud voice from overhead. Why, if it isn't Miss Bianca, cried the voice. The boy's Miss Bianca that he's so afraiding for, so she was left behind. A big hand reached down and scooped her up. Holding her carefully in his palm, one of the embassy footmen was now displaying her to an embassy housemaid. They had met for a tender interview by the boating water. Let alone the reward offered, added the footman, I've always had a kindness for the boy. I'd be glad to send her back to him anyways. As it is, 5 golden guineas for us, and off my back she'll go, the little beauty. From that callous yet altruistic palm, Miss Bianca looked down at Bernard. Did you hear? She called softly. I heard, said Bernard. Fretting for me. Ah, it's not for my porcelain pagoda, called Miss Bianca, but I quit you, dear Bernard. Pray believe me, it is but fate that casts our lots so far apart. I must return to the boy. I always thought you would, said Bernard bravely. I always knew it in my bones. Farewell, dear Miss Bianca. Farewell, dearest Bernard, called she. The footman carried her into the embassy. What a welcome there awaited her! Amid universal rejoicing, cream cheese was at once set out in a silver bonbon dish. The new ambassador offered one of his own silk handkerchiefs to furnish her with temporary sheets, and a place was immediately booked for her in the next bag to Norway. So ends the heroic tale of Bernard and Nils and Miss Bianca. Nils, after innumerable adventures, reached Norway in safety and met the poet again in Oslo, where they went out to dinner in the theater and supper afterwards. The poet kept his word and wrote a beautiful poem about Miss Bianca, which was printed in several anthologies. Bernard became secretary of the Prisoners' Aid Society and had a useful, respected, and happy career. Miss Bianca, reunited with the boy and once again domiciled in her porcelain pagoda, was happy too. It was really the life that suited her best. But none of them ever forgot each other or their famous adventures in the Black Castle. The end.